Anyway, we're here to talk about Song of Ice and Fire.
Yep.
We read one chapter this week, Bran 5,
Yep.
which was full of incident.
Oh, yes.
First impressions, Josh. What hit you with this chapter?
The action was actually really
Right?
well written.
I thought so, too.
In this chapter, I really liked that. Theon, we got some more information on Theon, and kind of like the beginning of his downfall, you could say, or maybe not the beginning, more of an explanation of maybe why he decided to not be so loyal to the Starks when he turned on them.
Expound on that. What happened to Theon in this chapter?
So he actually saved Bran's life at one point because the Wildings.
Yeah, so Bran is riding through the Wolfswood. He gets separated from the group. He's accosted by Osha, who becomes a character, and a bunch of some wildlings, some Night's Watch deserters. And there's a scuffle, and one of the wildlings, one of the Night's Watch deserters gets Bran in a headlock, a knife to his throat, and then Theon shoots an arrow right through his chest, but then Robb gives him some grief about it.
Yeah, surprisingly. I was like, it's like, thanks for saving my brother.
It was surprising?
I guess because we don't get into Robb's head at all, I guess we don't really get the inner workings of what he's thinking about. But I would have thought maybe there would have been a moment, because like we were just in a couple of chapters with Catelyn and Tyrion, where Catelyn very much wanted Tyrion dead, and they were kind of in a similar situation, and they bonded-ish, you could say, over it, and she kind of softened her stance on him. Whereas like Robb was very masculine about it. He's like, oh, how, you put my brother in danger and this and that. And it's like he saved his life too. So then maybe that could come back.
There's two sides to it. I mean, I did see Robb's point too. Like he gave a whole dressing down of like, look, if you were even a little bit off, you would have hurt Bran. Or what if the arrow hadn't killed the guy? He would have just killed Bran then. So Robb is a forward-thinking kind of guy. He's rising to the occasion and being the responsible one. Yeah. And Theon, we're getting to know him better. Like we get he's the kind of guy who's going to shoot a person in the chest and not think about it first. Yeah. Which is the kind of person he is. Yeah. He's also the kind of person who we get bits of him like bragging about sleeping around the town and just bragging about it. He brags to Robb about that, and Robb's like, not in front of Bran. We get him. I think Robb also chooses him out because the reason they weren't with Bran is because Theon spied a turkey and just led the group around so we could hunt it, which is a little irresponsible of him. A little bit, yeah. But I mean, how was he to know that these people were going to accost Bran? There's no real villains except the people who tried to cut Bran's throat. So Theon's is being built up as a character here, which I find interesting because just knowing where he goes and knowing that everything is taken away from him. Like of all the characters, Theon might be the most changed by the end of the story. Like he's a brash, young, egotistical kind of jackass here, and he is utterly flipped after what he goes through. But that's far in the future. Yeah,
but the introduction to Theon I did enjoy, or the introduction to diving deeper into his character, I guess, was something that I enjoyed, and also little things like like the saddle. You had this in your notes too, like the saddle was designed by Tyrion, the one that Bran is riding, and just kind of like that relationship too. There's like these little nuggets every so often, especially, not to keep referencing it, but coming off of the couple of chapters with Catelyn and Tyrion, where we are kind of seeing his character softened up a little bit. And this is another reminder, Tyrion. Yeah. And this is another reminder of that, where it's like, yeah, he's this Lannister, these Lannisters are bad people, but also at the same time, he's got this, he kind of designed this saddle that Bran is riding, and Bran is kind of in his territory where it's like, Tyrion's an imp, and you've got Bran who is paraplegic. So they're misfits, they're outcasts in a world, and especially in a chapter where we have Bran who can't use his legs, is useless, almost gets killed because he can't defend himself. And at one point, brags about being rich when he's about to be robbed. Like, well, I mean, or brags about being a Stark, but
because he's trying to like make them afraid. Yeah, like, oh, the Starks are powerful. So I think I put down that he traded in the stupidity that is kind of part of his family. Yeah, where he's surrounded by these wildlings and Night's Watch deserters, and he's like, "Don't touch me, I'm a Stark." Yeah. And then in their heads, they're just like, "Oh, he's a Stark. We can take this kid hostage and sell him."
The Stark stupidity is what I wrote down. But yeah, so then you got like Bran, and then juxtaposed against it, you have Theon, who is this like strapping, young, good-looking, cocky, opposite of what Bran is. And I don't know. I kind of like the way that George R. R. Martin kind of meshes these two themes together. It's like on the one hand, you've got Catelyn, who has gone through something traumatic and comes out on the other end, and then you have her sister, who has gone through something traumatic and is still drowning in the deep end.
Came out the worse for wear. I
yeah.
guess.
So we talk about his world building being fun with like throwing in exposition without being forced exposition. There's also kind of this character building where there is Bran is very much established as weak and unable to defend himself here, and now I'm worrying about him moving forward. And then you have Theon, who is very much established as this character who almost is juxtaposed against Robb too, who is more similar to Theon, but seems more straight and narrow than Theon, who seems to be more
cavalier, don't make hair kind of guy.
Yeah, he's more on like the Lannister side of the scale of being full of himself.
There was one line that like kind of pointed out like what the approach is to Theon. He smiled a lot as if the world were a secret joke that only he was clever enough to understand.
Yeah.
Which is like, that's great.
That's a good line.
Just a good line about like, I instantly see that shit-eating grin he must have in his face all the time. Let's talk quickly about the action, because I was reading it and I did enjoy it a lot, like more than I had the past action scenes.
Yeah.
It's after, the wildlings are going to take Bran, but then Robb starts in on them. And there's just some good descriptions. The wolves get in on it. There's the dire wolf plunged in after him being one of the Night's Watchmen, and the white water turned red where they had vanished. Later, Summer was savaging Hallie, pulling glistening blue snakes from her belly. Her eyes were wide and staring. And finally, the guy who Theon shoots, Stiv, gave a choked gasp as a half-foot of razor-tipped broadhead suddenly exploded out of his chest. Just good, like, punchy action writing.
Yeah. I liked it, especially coming off the chapter with Ned kind of getting attacked, which was
kind of quick.
It was quick. It wasn't... I think it was still well written, but this very much stuck out to me, and I was drawn into the action a lot more than some of these other fights that we've read. But yeah, I quite enjoyed this chapter. There was a lot there, and also word travels very fast in this book, as opposed to like the show. So because it was maybe I'm misremembering the show a little bit, but already we know that Ned has been attacked, and that happened like.
Yeah, there was 2 chapters ago,
so.
And Robb has to like kind of break this news to Bran. I also liked how Robb was hesitant to do it.
Yeah,
like a theme that you will notice with Robb a lot, even though we're not in his head, but we'll see this again and again, is that he's a young guy. He's 15. Remember in the books again, middle schooler, or I guess high schooler by this point, like fresh. He's a high school freshman, and he's running a household. And he's always oscillating between, I'm the head of this household, I'm very important, I make decisions, I'm running the place, but also like being a scared, kind of out of his depth, out of his element 15-year-old kid. And we see that, and they always juxtapose it. There's like a continuing theme where he'll be like, he looks scared and like a child, then he put on the crown and he becomes a king, that kind of thing. Which again kind of goes back to you play different roles depending on what you have to do, even what you wear. And in this situation, he's trying to tell Bran about what happened to Ned. And he says, I never know how much to tell you, Bran. I wish you were older. So he wants to talk, but he can't quite find a way to do it. And that's that's a younger thing. He's not sure how to communicate. But then later, Robb the Lord, and I quote that, is thinking about calling the banners and attacking the Lannisters to revenge Ned being attacked in the streets of King's Landing. So he's a character caught between these two poles. And you have to wonder if we were in his head, what that would be like, but we never are, so...
And that was something that I wrote down, is I really wish we would, at some point, get into Robb's head, just because he does seem like such a fascinating character. And it seems odd to me that, I don't know how many of these characters we meet, we eventually get inside of their heads. Like, do we go inside with Theon?
Theon we do, yeah. Okay. We will eventually, not in this book.
I was hoping so. But, like, the idea that Robb isn't involved in these chapters, he's like removed almost. It seems strange to me, and I'm trying to figure out if maybe there's a deeper meaning or some kind of deeper theme for Robb being divorced from everything else that's going on. Why is he the outsider? I don't know. It's interesting to me.
I have an answer to that. I think the answer. Well, Julie says that Robb had to grow up faster than he expected, which I think is completely true. Which is why he has this. He hasn't quite grown into his like authoritarian thing yet. I mean, the reason. Till we don't get into his head, is I think George R. R. Martin knew he was going to die at the Red Wedding eventually. So he's like, do I need both Catelyn and Robb to get inside their heads so we can lose one important character? Like, he knew Robb was going to die, so he didn't bother getting in his head. And it stands out more on the show because you can see his face.
Yeah.
And he became a bigger character there. But George R. R. Martin has said that one of his biggest regrets is not giving Robb point of view chapters.
That would have been, I feel like the Red Wedding would have been even more powerful.
Right.
Because, you want to talk about when it happened on the show, it was so shocking because you're murdering all of these main characters. That from a literary sense, that would have been interesting because you are establishing these characters. You have built them up inside of his head. And then not one, but two are gone in a span of like that.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, I guess the only hard part would be like, who do you tell? I don't know. I guess I don't know.
I mean, yeah,
the perspective of that chapter.
We'll get there when we get there, but obviously we don't hear from Robb's perspective.
Yeah,
and we hear it from Catelyn's.
So that would have been hard to be like, who do you choose to tell the perspective from?
And maybe it could be he doesn't have to choose in this situation.
Could have been like the action movie. You blow up a building and you show it from 6 different angles. Just the same chapter over and over and over. The Red Wedding book. It's the Red Wedding from every single angle, from every single person in the room.
That sounds horrible. I would hate that.
Torture.
Not just because it's painful, because it's like it's horribly inefficient.
Oh yeah.
Like one of the things I love about the first book and the first kind of 3 books really is that he is pretty efficient.
Yeah.
Like this chapter, the plot didn't advance a ton, but we do get new things going on. We do learn a lot of new information. It wasn't wasted ink.
No.
And again, I keep teasing this. I feel like in the later books, it just slows down to such a crawl, and it is. You could have snipped things and been fine, George R. R. Martin. But I'm not a writer, so you do what you want.
I do know that. I mean, I've heard people talking about the book in the office at some point. I forget when somebody told me this, but I guess is there a chapter where we meet somebody on like a mountain or something, and like we never meet them ever again? It was something
couple
like
of chapters like that.
Yeah, I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I mean, we'll get there when we get there.
That doesn't seem efficient.
This chapter. Well, okay, fine. I'm gonna do this. Like, look, I mean, there are things you can do. That there's like a fun, interesting side story that kind of adds context and adds mood or tone or whatever. And there's just writing everything you can because you're allowed to do it and not deciding, okay, how much is necessary to establish the tone I want and how much can be cut.
Yeah.
Like, there are little dalliances in the first 3 books, but if it comes like every once in a while, it's okay. It's like flavor. It's like you can spice the gumbo a little bit.
Yeah.
If the gumbo is all spice, then it's not gumbo. It's a pile of spice. This isn't a perfect metaphor, but the point is, I think that there's a way to do side stories well and a way to overdo it. I think he does them well in the first 3 books, and maybe he overdoes it again. In this last 2, but that's in the future.
I'm looking forward to the future books. I know you're kind of preparing me for them to be a little bit more disappointing, but it's like, I like watching the bad James Bond movies too, because they're just, it's part of
they're not
story,
bad. So. I want to make it very clear. I do not think the last 2 books are bad. I like them very much, but I do think they have more problems. But let's talk more about the Bran chapter.
5.
Okay. I also wanted to highlight something that we can forget about the main characters in this book a lot of the time, especially the Starks, the Lannisters, the Greyjoys, everybody, is that they are all members of Westeros' super rich, super elite, just high class people.
High society, yeah.
Like Bran, right? Like the Starks are underdogs in the story, which is true. I mean, Ned gets killed. Catelyn and Robb get killed. Sansa gets like beaten and raped and passed from other people to other people. Arya has to be on the run. They're underdogs. At the same time, let's not forget that they are like nobility. Yeah. And here, Bran ran a terrible, terrible luck. He is paraplegic at the age of 10. It's awful, or 9 or whatever he is. But when he goes out in this chapter on a specially trained horse, accompanied by Robb, Theon, 4 guardsmen, 2 direwolves, a stable boy, and Maester Luwin, who just, for some reason, I think it's can be easy to forget that these people are very, very privileged, and that we don't really have many like peasant narratives in the book. No. Like none of the point of view characters really are the ground level people. Like Davos, kind of, he was a peasant, and he grew up and he became a lord, but even he is up there. Yeah. So that's interesting to keep in mind. And George R. R. Martin is aware of that and does highlight it. Like, I like this moment where after the wildlings and the Night's Watchman accost Bran, who's alone, he writes that Bran was suddenly conscious of how richly he was dressed. The man's clothes were filthy, fallen almost to pieces, patched here and there with blue and there with a dark green, and faded everywhere to gray, and once that cloak might have been black. So I think it's that George R. Martin does a good job of keeping kind of class distinctions a part of his story and weaving them into the story in an interesting, believable, kind of meaningful way that would actually do affect things.
I agree. And I just, with Bran and this idea that he's the underdog and the Starks are the underdog, it reminded me a lot of...
Which they are. Man,
they are. And it reminded me, I kept going back to the Ned chapters, where it's like, Ned is our main-ish character, and he is this underdog in this world that is so much larger than him in King's Landing. But he fits in because he is nobility. He is high society. Exactly. So it's weird to think of him as this kind of sleuth who's going around trying to figure out this mystery. But it's like, he's almost playing with house money because the reason he's running around is because he's there because his best friend is king. Like, and he's head of his house in the north. Like, it is an interesting way to kind of spin things and have this like Stark privilege almost of all of these characters. It's like bad things happening to good people, but then at the same time, it doesn't make the bad things happening to them somehow justified. Like Bran being a paraplegic is still a bad. It gives you almost a rooting interest in these high society types that you maybe otherwise wouldn't. Like the Lannisters, the most interesting and sympathetic Lannister is Tyrion because he's the imp. He isn't like everybody else, and there's a rooting interest there. And then it becomes Jaime later on because this redemption arc that he wants to go on. And
even everything. Cersei, when she gets paraded through the streets naked, is pretty brutal in the books and the show. Yeah,
so it's this kind of deconstruction almost of these really rich high society characters down to almost like this peasant level. Like Cersei getting marched through the streets naked is this peasant level thing, and it's kind of nice to level them off there. They're not infinitely powerful or infinitely everything. It's that they come crashing back down, and it almost humanizes them. And then it's up to them, like Cersei, to go back and make us not think of them as human. But
like Martin always, I mean, he makes sure that his characters have ups and downs. I mean, Theon too, obviously, a rich, privileged person, but I mean, he gets brought really, 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 really low. I always found it kind of interesting. I wondered why or if it was a conscious choice, or what it would be like if we had the perspective of someone who was just like a person, just like someone living in a town. But I guess maybe they wouldn't affect the narrative. Like the show added in, I don't know if you remember her, this prostitute character named Roz, who was like this redheaded, who is not in the books at all, as just like kind of our ground level perspective, and then she ends up dying after Joffrey kills her because that's what he does.
It would have been interesting maybe to have a chapter from like an outsider, like a peasant character, just to be like, how much does this game matter in the long run, in the context of everybody else's life? It's almost like, House of Cards. It's like we can get involved in this political high thriller society thing, but it's like, how much does it matter to the voter in Alabama? Like that's Cersei and this whole Ned mystery, and Ned and that death and him getting killed. How much does that matter to somebody who is up in the north in a village outside of all the way up in the north? Doesn't really matter to them. So that to me, or Winterfell. That's what I was trying to think of. Winterfell. I was going to say Westeros.
Fair enough. I gotcha.
How much does that matter to them? But maybe that takes it out a little bit from this political thriller, but maybe it could also focus into the end game of the White Walkers, where it's like everybody, because that's kind of what's so thrilling about the show. Everybody's so interested in the game for the throne. And it's like, yeah, but the White Walkers at the end of the day are just going to kill everybody, so, or theoretically could, so, but that's a lot if we're not going to write side chapters.
I was just going to say that, like, I'm complaining about this, like, what do I want? More people who don't really matter to the narrative? He can't please us. He can't please me, I guess.
I'm very pleased.
I love it, George R. R. Martin. You're so difficult.
This is like going back. This is going
too.
back and putting extra syrup on the ice cream. It's like, I already have the syrup. I want more, though. Yeah, the Bugs Bunny socks. So
they're intense. Also, before we end, really quick, new character here, Osha the Wildling.
Yep.
Do you recall her from the show?
I do. She's kind of like Bran's. I don't want to say handler in a way, but like his wildling friend.
Yeah, his wildling buddy.
I remember the scenes with, I believe it was Bran, Hodor, and Osha are kind of all grouped up at some point. And Osha is almost like the bridge between what's beyond the wall and...
Because she lived there at one point.
Yeah, and like everything that's happening here. So it's like that, again, the juxtaposition of Bran has kind of been told and been afraid of everything that's outside of Winterfell. And then here's Osha, who is very far outside of Winterfell, and she's not a bad character.
Yeah, and she can humanize wildlings. She can kind of provide Bran with more perspective, which it's his journey at the end of the day, so he's going to need that. Did you like her here? I mean, she was attacking Robb with, I also liked this line, blah, blah, blah. Her long spear was a steel-headed serpent, which is also some fun, again, good fight imagery.
Yeah. It was an interesting introduction. I guess knowing where her character goes, I was a little bit more I guess sympathetic and empathetic into her position. But yeah.
Ooh, J. Angie says Bran's nanny, which
Bran's nanny. That's
kind of a reductive way of saying it, but sure, we can go with that. And Josh, any other thoughts about this chapter?
No, it was good. The very well written fight sequence. It was one of the better ones that I've read.
Kind of weird because like it wasn't a terribly important one.
No.
Like in terms of the overall arc, but we'll see it. Next week, I think we should read 2. I think we got a quick, a Tyrion one, and then a quick Ned one.
Okay.
Let's do that. Reconvene here at 4 p.m. next Wednesday on the Winter Spring Facebook page for more Take the Black Live, more Game of Thrones news, more Song of Ice and Fire news, more A Song of Dan and Josh. And just one more reminder, we are on iTunes and Google Play as a podcast. If you could download, subscribe, rate 5 stars, give a positive review, we would appreciate it. Otherwise, we'll see you back here at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time next Wednesday on the Facebook page. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.
Thank you.